gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III. And what you're doing is very disrespectful to the country, this country, that's backed you far more than a lot of people said they should have.
Have you said thank you once this entire meeting?
Hello and welcome to Ukraine the Latest. We've only recorded an emergency podcast once before, when Prigozhin launched his mutiny. But we have just watched one of the most extraordinary press conferences in modern political history. One which could have huge implications, not only for the war, but for the West itself. President Zelensky had arrived at the White House a few hours earlier, apparently to sign the minerals deal we've discussed in detail so much this week. The press conference between him, Trump, and Vice President J.D. Vance began cordially. But then, this happened.
He broke this ceasefire. He killed our people, and he didn't exchange prisoners. We signed the exchange of prisoners, but he didn't do it. What kind of diplomacy, J.D., you are speaking about? What do you mean?
I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media. Right now, you guys are going around and forcing conscripts to the front lines because you have manpower problems. You should be thanking the President for trying to bring an end to this conflict.
Have you ever been to Ukraine that you say what problems we have?
I have been to.
Come once.
I've actually watched and seen the stories, and I know what happens is you bring people, you bring them on a propaganda tour, Mr. President. Do you disagree that you've had problems bringing people into your military? And do you think that it's respectful to come to the Oval Office of the United States of America and attack the administration that is trying to prevent the destruction of your country?
A lot of questions. Let's start from the beginning.
Sure.
First of all, during the war, everybody has problems, even you, but you have nice ocean and don't feel now, but you will feel it in the future. God bless.
You don't know that.
God bless. God bless. You will not have a war.
Don't tell us what we're going to feel. We're trying to solve a problem. Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
I'm not telling you.
Because you're in no position to dictate that.
That's
Remember
exactly
this. You're in no position to dictate what we're going to feel. We're going to feel very good.
You will feel influence.
We're going to feel very good and very strong.
You will feel influence.
You're right now not in a very good position. You've allowed yourself to be in a very bad position, and he happens to be right about it.
From the very beginning of the war.
You're not in a good position. You don't have the cards right now. With us, you start having cards. But right now, you don't. You're playing cards. You're playing cards. You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III. And what you're doing is very disrespectful to the country, this country, that's backed you far more than a lot of people said they should have.
Have you said thank you once? This entire meeting? No, in this entire meeting, have you said thank you? You went to Pennsylvania and campaigned for the opposition in October. Offer some words of appreciation for the United States of America and the president who's trying to save your country.
Please, you think that if you will speak very loudly about the war, you can...
He's not speaking loudly. He's not speaking loudly. Your country's in big trouble.
Can I
Wait a minute. No. You've done a lot of talking. Your country is in big trouble.
I know.
You're not winning. You're not winning this. You have a damn good chance of coming out okay because of us.
Mr. President, we are staying in our country, staying strong from the very beginning of the war. We've been alone, and we are thankful. I said thanks
you haven't
in
been
this
alone.
cabinet.
You haven't been alone.
In this cabinet.
We gave you, through this stupid president, $350 billion. We gave you military equipment, and your men are brave, but they had to use our military.
What about
if you didn't have our military equipment,
if
you didn't have our military equipment, this war would have been over in 2 weeks.
In 3 days. I heard it from Putin. In 3 days. This is something
maybe
new.
less.
In 2 weeks. Of course, yes.
It's going to be a very hard thing to do business like this. I tell you.
Just say thank you.
Said a lot of
except that there are disagreements, and let's go litigate those disagreements rather than trying to fight it out in the American media when you're wrong. We know that you're wrong.
But you see, I think it's good for the American people to see what's going on over there. I think it's very important. That's why I kept this going so long. You have to be thankful. You don't have the cards.
Thankful.
You're buried there. You're People are dying. You're
again,
running low on soldiers. Listen, you're running
Mr.
low
President.
on soldiers. It would be a damn good thing.
Mr.
And then you tell us, I don't want a ceasefire. I don't want a ceasefire. I want to go, and I wanted this. Look, if you could get a ceasefire right now, I tell you, you take it so the bullets stop flying and your men stop getting killed.
Of course, we want to stop the war.
But you're saying you don't want a ceasefire.
But I said to you,
I want a ceasefire.
with guarantees.
Because you'll get a ceasefire faster than an agreement.
Ask our people about ceasefire, what they think.
When the press conference ended, Zelensky left the White House. The planned press conference was cancelled, and it would appear that the minerals deal is now off. President Trump then posted the following on social media. We had a very meaningful meeting in the White House today. Much was learned that could never be understood without conversation under such fire and pressure. It's amazing what comes out through emotion, and I have determined that President Zelensky is not ready for peace if America is involved, because he feels our involvement gives him a big advantage in negotiations. I don't want advantage, I want peace. He disrespected the United States of America in its cherished Oval Office. He can come back when he is ready for peace. Dom, suffice to say, you and I knew immediately we needed to record this. What was your reaction?
Well, it was dumbfounded shock, I think. I think the signs were all there. Maybe in the future we're going to look back and see that all the clues were there. We were just choosing to analyse something differently. But I think this is a very clear expression of what this Trump administration is all about. I mean, that was an ambush set, ambush sprung. J.D. Vance has been present in the Oval Office for the Macron visit and Starmer's visit, I think. I didn't feel the need to leap in. This was clearly premeditated. It was the most extraordinary display of undiplomatic behaviour. That is not what should happen in the Oval Office. We're used to Trump being a fairly freewheeling president, but this was insulting. You know, and the one thing you don't do if you have any class at all is insult your guests. Certainly not in public like that. So what did I take from it? Well, I mean, let me just read you a statement from a friend of mine, Mikhail Kobosko, who's a Polish MEP. He said, President Zelensky withstood Putin's invasion, which is why he withstood the shouting of Donald Trump and J.D. Vance. Both gentlemen should finally visit Ukraine themselves and see what the front line looks like and look Ukrainian soldiers in the eye. They were the ones who said that President Zelensky wants a world war. Incredible detachment from reality of the American administration. So that's the first view from an official in a position in Europe. But what did I take from it just in the last hour or so? Well, it's difficult to know where to start because some things have what's bigger than the others. But let's start with the minerals deal. That was supposedly the reason President Zelensky, well, the perfunctory reason he was there. Of course, the reason he was in the White House was to shore up the position ahead of any potential negotiations. But it was all about the minerals deal in public, which has not been signed. The minerals deal, whether or not it's important for the extraction of actual minerals, it was the security guarantees that might be pegged to it. You heard Trump yesterday with British Prime Minister Keir Starmer talking about, well, you know, minerals, then the US are going to be present, indicating, sort of hinting that there would be some kind of American security to look after their own people and by extension, Ukraine, if there was a minerals deal. So that now has not been signed. That is almost certainly off. The idea that it was going to draw security guarantees was always a bit of a stretch. I mean, ask the Kuwaitis who had a lot of American oil companies in their country in 1990 as Saddam Hussein drove in. So, you know, one doesn't automatically lead to another, but there were thoughts that it was a road towards security guarantees in the absence of any kind of NATO Article 5. So what now? Well, does Ukraine do a deal for the mineral deposits with Europe? That might be an interesting sidebar to this, and whether or not that might make Donald Trump think about his negotiating style, we don't know. What else was there? Well, who speaks for Ukraine now? President Zelensky has left in the last few moments, actually. You've just been watching. He's now left the White House. Who speaks for Ukraine in the United States right now? Because the Ukrainian ambassador, she had her head in her hands. She looked just absolutely blindsided by this. Will she be welcomed in the corridors of power in the White House? Probably not. So who speaks for Ukraine? Is that a role for the kind of Euro gang, the Starmers, the Macrons, those that have had a lovely, nice visit a series of visits this week. But who keeps that channel of communication open now? And is this the moment when Europe, someone, or the collectively in Europe, has to actually protect Ukraine from the United States so that no more harm is done, and has to keep those channels of communication open, to keep this all-important momentum towards a better settlement than or a better situation than Ukraine is in today? Try to keep that momentum going. Do you need a Starmer to have one hand on Trump, one hand on Zelensky, saying, keep apart, lads, I'll be the go-between? Interesting. Next thing, the meeting on Sunday, we know Zelensky is going, or maybe it'll be earlier now, he might be on a plane in the next couple of hours, but this meeting between President Zelensky and Keir Starmer on Sunday, that's going to be very, very important. And then Monday, when Starmer hosts a load of other European leaders, that is going to be, well, you called it one of the most, if not the most consequential diplomatic meeting since the Second World War.
That's my feeling, yeah.
Yeah, I'd struggle to think of another one straight off the top of my head. I think you're probably right there. I mean, overall, just the language of it, the language that you'll hear from Donald Trump was extraordinary. And the statement he's put out, Donald Trump put out a statement a few minutes ago saying, much was learned that could never be understood without conversation under such fire and pressure. My comment is, yes, absolutely. And NATO allies will have taken note of what they learned under witnessing that fire and pressure. Trump continues in his statement, I've determined that President Zelensky is not ready for peace if America is involved because he feels our involvement gives him a big advantage in negotiations. To which I would say, do you not want a friend in need to have a big advantage in negotiations against a murderous bully like Putin? And then he said, Trump finished, I don't want advantage, I want peace. He disrespected the US in its cherished Oval Office. He can come back when he's ready for peace. I mean, that is the language of a parent to a child. It just says everything about how Trump views this relationship. That is just a disgraceful way. And as for who disrespected the cherished Oval Office, allowing Zelensky to be treated that way,
a democratically elected leader.
Yeah, and J.D. Vance speaking to him like that, I mean, the right thing to do for Trump would have been to step in and say, okay, thank you, Mr. Vice President. You're speaking to the elected president of another country. That's not how you address them. We'll take this offline. That would have been enough for us all to go, ooh, blimey, that sounds a bit spicy. But, he could have drawn it to a halt there, but he was happy to let it go on.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to know where to start, as you say, Dom. I mean, another line that struck me over the exchange was when Trump said, I'm in the middle. I'm for both Ukraine and Russia. I think, in a sense, that says it all, doesn't it? That where he really stands on this war, not that that's necessarily any great surprise to us, but the fact that anybody could take from this exchange that he would be in favour of Ukraine. I think the other aspect of this, which perhaps is extremely revealing, is when all of a sudden he offloaded frustrations about Hunter Biden and the alleged connections between Ukraine and Hunter Biden. It was almost as if this sort of buried resentment just suddenly exploded in the Oval Office, in front of the world press, in front of so many significant leaders.
One more question to Mr. Vice President. I'm sorry, here.
It's going to be a tough deal to make because the attitudes have to change.
What if Russia breaks ceasefire? What if Russia breaks peace talks? What do you do then? I understand that it's a heated conversation right now.
What are you saying?
She's asking, what if Russia breaks the ceasefire?
What if anything? What if a bomb drops on your head right now? Okay? What if they broke it? I don't know. They broke it with Biden because Biden, they didn't respect him. They didn't respect Obama. They respect me. Let me tell you, Putin went through a hell of a lot with me. He went through a phony witch hunt where they used him and Russia. You ever hear of that deal? That was a phony Hunter Biden, Joe Biden scam. Hillary Clinton, Shifty Adam Schiff. It was a Democrat scam. And he had to go through that. And he did go through it. We didn't end up in a war. And he went through it. He was accused of all that stuff. He had nothing to do with it. It came out of Hunter Biden's bathroom. It came out of Hunter Biden's bedroom. It was disgusting. And then they said, oh, the laptop from hell was made by Russia, the 51 agents. The whole thing was a scam. And he had to put up with that. He was being accused of all that stuff.
I can't help but think the reaction in Downing Street, in the Elysee Palace after the work of the past week will be one of utter shock. And as you say, Dom, I think the mood in Europe now will be anybody who, I mean, we've said this so many times, but anybody who thinks that this White House can be won round clearly has had their eyes opened yet again today. And I think you put it right, Dom, that anybody thinking about this now has to think much more widely than just Ukraine. They have to think about themselves and their own defence. I mean, do we seriously think that this White House would come to the support of any NATO ally in a situation of existential peril, given the language here and the lack of respect for democracies versus autocratic systems? I'll read a little bit more reaction from others, just so you know it's not just us feeling this way. Michael Weiss, well-known commentator on the war. After the cosy Macron and Starmer meetings, this should serve as an oversized bucket of cold water dumped on the heads of European leaders. No, things are not going well. No, things cannot be finessed or managed into going well. This was as premeditated as it was unprecedented. Another, Liz Cookman, who writes for our paper, this is one of the most shocking things I've seen from this whole war. For those of us who've seen the bodies, the smashed limbs, the destroyed homes, the grieving children up close in Ukraine, it is absolutely gut-wrenching to know that it counts for nothing. Roland Oliphant, of course, well-known commentator from our own podcast and indeed more widely, said diplomatic disaster. There's no other way to describe it. Of all the possible outcomes of today's high-stakes meeting at the White House, Zelensky and Trump shouting at each other is not one that anyone pictured. It is beyond a worst-case scenario. Now, some will criticise President Zelensky. They'll say that he shouldn't have spoken up, that he should have just sat there and taken whatever abuse was handed to him. But bear in mind, he is a leader who is representing his people. Could he realistically do that? I think that is a contestable point. I think also, as well, perhaps we should be grateful for seeing what is now undeniable playing out in front of us. Some of these conversations are no doubt taking place behind closed doors between officials. Here it played out in the open, and it has underscored, as you say, Dom, what many of us have suspected for a long time about the reality of the way those negotiations were likely to go. I should say, I do find it quite extraordinary talking too about Zelensky not being ready for peace, as if Zelensky is a key player in these talks. Because of the United States, Zelensky is not a key player in these talks. It is between Russia and the United States. So it seems there's just a total muddle here, attacking somebody who's not even in the room at the decision of President Trump and J.D. Vance. So we could go on here about many of the various other things that were said in this 5 or 6 minute dressing down. I think there's no other way of describing it. But I think really we need to be focusing on what this all means for Europe. You've said it all, Dom, in terms of the ramifications. All eyes now will be on Sunday and Monday. What are you seeing? I think we've got some breaking news.
Donald Tusk, Prime Minister of Poland, just tweeting, "Dear President Zelensky, dear Ukrainian friends, you are not alone." So another European leader coming out. It'd be interesting to see how that firms up over the next couple of days. Yeah, I mean, I think Sunday and Monday in particular will point to Europe. This is your moment, Europe. You know, are you serious about this? Are you going to continue to buy US kit? Are you sure that you'll get the software upgrades to the next fancy bit of kit that you're going to buy from Lockheed Martin? Or do you think you need to buy in Europe? Do you need to get into the GCAP, the next generation fighter that Britain's leading, or the French-German thing, or what have you? But this is Europe's moment, both in terms of diplomacy, defence industrial base, and the most immediate thing of keeping Ukraine in this fight militarily and also diplomatically.
Well, there will no doubt be more reaction over the coming minutes, hours and days. We, of course, will be monitoring it all, and do keep an eye on the Telegraph this weekend as we monitor what is, as I said earlier on, one of the most extraordinary summits for a very, very long time, perhaps since the Second World War, in terms of the ramifications for Europe itself and its own defence. There is no hiding now. Europe has to decide whether it is willing to back Ukraine in the way that it has promised, or whether it will still try and win round the United States. But it seems, to me at least, and I think many, many others, that that is for the birds, setting the stage for one of the most historic summits and couple of days in modern political history.
My final point, Francis, is I'm very struck by the language here. We started the full-scale invasion, President Zelensky saying, I don't need a ride, I need ammunition. Today we have Trump saying, you don't have the cards right now. With us, you start having cards. And President Zelensky saying, I'm not playing cards.
Not in a good position. You don't have the cards right now. With us, you start having cards. But right now, you don't. You're playing cards.
I mean, gripping stuff. And resonant of that point in the Second World War when we finally prevailed in North Africa, and amid the jubilation, Churchill just put a slight hand on the shoulder of the public and said, this is not the end, this is not even the beginning of the end, but it is perhaps the end of the beginning. And I just wonder if that's where we are right now.
All I can say is this. He might have broken deals with Obama and Bush, and he might have broken them with Biden. He did, maybe. Maybe he didn't. I don't know what happened. But he didn't break them with me. He wants to make a deal. I don't know if you can make a deal. The problem is, I've empowered you to be a tough guy. And I don't think you'd be a tough guy without the United States. And your people are very brave. But you're either going to make a deal or we're out. And if we're out, you'll fight it out. I don't think it's going to be pretty, but you'll fight it out. But you don't have the cards. But once we sign that deal, you're in a much better position. But you're not acting at all thankful. And that's not a nice thing. I'll be honest, that's not a nice thing. All right, I think we've seen enough. What do you think? Huh? This is going to be great television, I will say that.